Hello everybody. As many of you requested, I'm going to be doing a movie study about Elastigirl, and I'm going to be giving you a tutorial on how everything works. So first off, I'm drawing this in Clip Studio. I've got a DPI of 500 so that we can get a lot of details in, and basically I'm going to show you all the steps I take to draw one of these movie studies. So first off, I start with drawing a grid over my reference there, and then I draw a big scaled version of that, and I do a rough sketch over it, which I will then start warping in order to fit dimensions because I'm doing this by eye, and so it's hard to get proportions right. And after that I will go in higher detail to draw in bits like the background, so the lights for example, some of the scaffolding. I will draw that in higher detail with a finer brush. And then after that, I'm going to go in and start working on details in the characters' faces, such as Elastigirl's hand. Here I'm going to be showing you how I draw some of the details, for example, the eye. And I use a really thin, rough pencil brush that you can find there in Clip Studio. And I basically just go over and I add thicker lines and I warp stuff in order to make sure the proportions fit and that everything is correct. I don't really care about the line art being too clean because after all, we're not going to be including the sketch in the final product. It's going to be all just flat color. So this is really just to help us guide where everything goes and where all the shading fits. For example, on the mask you can see some shading there. Anyway, this is the finished resolution for the sketch. And after that, we're going to go in and we're going to start blocking out colors for the background. So we're going to start with a shade of deep dark blue, and we're going to have to give white to our sketch in order to see it and actually color it. So we're going to lower the opacity for that. And I'm going to start just by blocking out some of the lighting fixtures on the characters' faces and in the background, like so. This is going to help me make sure that I'm always thinking about where the lighting goes rather than where the base colors are. The lighting is really the main reason why I do these movie studies, which is also why I chose this specific scene, because it has a very interesting like fluorescent blue with hints of yellow, and I haven't really worked with colors like that much, which is why I wanted to explore this. And here I am currently blocking out all the bluer lighting for the drawing, such as the back of the hair of this man that Elastigirl seems to be hitting. And I'm using this blend tool that allows me to create this hair-like texture. But really the whole idea behind this phase is just blocking out colors. You can be messy, you can just crush it all out because we will refine it later with blend tools, with smaller brushes. And right now it's just about mapping out where you're going to put all your color. Don't worry too much in this phase about making it look like the reference photo, because you can always fix that later. You can always move colors around. This is really just a guide for you and a really great way for you to practice imagining where lights go on your own by looking at the reference picture only a couple times and just trying to understand where the light would go naturally. For example, in this arm section here, obviously the light will be coming from the two little lanterns right on the right of Elastigirl's face. So we really need to make sure that that glow shows up in this color mapping here. We're also focusing a lot on the darker parts now, not just the lighting, because we need to make sure that there's enough contrast for the glowing textures to show up on the final render. And of course, we need to make sure that Elastigirl's logo shows up. And this part was probably the hardest for color blocking. It's putting on shadows in her face. These shadows were really challenging because they mixed two very polar colors, a more reddish muddy brown and then a really bright blue. And it was really difficult making sure that we had the right shading in order to show the shape of her face. I especially struggled with her nose and the area on her chin, and I hope that gets better in the refinement process. But for now, in the color blocking, It's not that important to get it perfect yet. We're happy with just blocking where the general colors will be. Especially for like her teeth, we just want to show the illusion of where the light will go, more or less. And again, we're just focusing on really just splotching out the main colors. For the hair, we just put in a bit of blue there and blended it and just made sure that the mapping really just works out and works as a good guide for later. And normally I wouldn't do the eyes immediately in this color blocking process, but for some reason I just felt like exploring the way these pupils and the iris responded to the lighting in this background. Now I'm going to show you how I textured the hair. I think it's really good for me to show you guys how I do specific parts of the rendering process. And here I'm just using a special blur tool that I have and really just blending the individual hairs and using a really small brush to add little bits of highlights to it, as well as giving a darker, more defined shade to the parts of the head that I don't want to stand out as much. And now we're going to start the rendering process of Elastigirl's suit. So first off, we're going to start with her really fab logo. I love it because I just realized it's supposed to be an E and a G. I never really paid attention to it before, and I'm in love with the idea of it. So we start off with a really bright red and we just sort of muted it down. And now we are texturing and shaping a bit of the body. I've accidentally smudged some of the bits when refining the color blocking. So I really need to make sure that those lines are crisp and well cleaned up and that we don't have any ugly pixels laying around that aren't supposed to be there. And right now I'm really just touching up some things here and there using glowings, using multiplying layers, and just making sure everything's rendered out. Here I'm sort of testing out where I want my lighting to go, but I'm still not 100% happy where everything's goes. You see I'm going to erase some parts of the eye and I add some shading to it later. It's really just sort of me trying to figure out how to add depth to the face and not kill it by adding too many shadows or not enough and making the face look flat. So here you can see me struggling a bit with the wrinkle by her face. Now I'm adding this weird dark silhouette across, and some of you might be thinking, what is she doing? What I'm doing is I'm adding a bit more contrast to the glowing border that you can see on the edges of the two characters. And then after that I need to add some highlights here and there to make sure that it's not completely lost in darkness, the image, but we still get that nice contrast between the two. I also wanted to add an outline to the outside of Elastigirl's eyes to make sure that they weren't too blurry, because I did want that to be crisp and not weirdly smudged and blocky like the rest. Now I'm adding a bit more glowing to the face because I realized I muted the colors too much accidentally, so I'm trying to rescue it at this point. And as you'll see, really 90% of my coloring process is me just going back and fixing things. The way I do backgrounds for these studies are really simple. I just choose 6 colors mainly. Here I chose like 6 or 7 colors and I just smudged them out anywhere I could and blended them out until they look natural. So here's the final process. You just add your line art, block it out, and add some finishing touches, and there you go. I'm really glad that you guys wanted to look at this tutorial. It was a lot of fun to draw, so thank you so much for watching.